So we are reading At the Dark End of the Street, Black Women, Rape and Resistance, A New History of the Civil Rights Movement from Rosa Parks to the Rise of Black Power by Danielle McGuire. And our sessions it started June 3rd and they last until July 29th. They are from 6:30 to 8. So now we are going to go into the discussions on the prologue and chapter 1, They Kill Me If I Told, and I created some bullet points about the prologue and chapter 1 for people who probably didn't get to read it all or who just wanted to focus on main concepts. And so, Michelle, if you think it's okay, I can read through both and see for people maybe who haven't finished it or
good idea.
Okay. So for the prologue, the key points that I thought were important, in the prologue we get introduced to Reese Taylor, who is a Black woman who was gang raped by 6 white men after leaving church, and this is how we are introduced to Rosa Parks, who as an activist and not just as the woman who refused to get off the bus 10 years after this incident happened. We learned that Rosa Parks was a militant race woman, a sharp detective, and an anti-rape activist long before she became, like I said, the patron saint of the bus boycott. We learned that the interracial rape of Black women was a strategy white supremacists used to instill fear, order, and to quiet resistance from Black people. We learned that Ms. Taylor's rape was not unusual, especially during the Depression and the Jim Crow era. We learned that against common belief, Black women were not quiet about being raped. And then Dr. Danielle gives a review of some of the chapters in the book. And so chapter 2 and 3 reveal the history of the Montgomery campaign as a women's movement. Chapter 4 exposes the power of sex in maintaining the South's racial hierarchy. Chapter 5 discusses Betty Jean Owens' trial, who was a Black college student gang raped by 4 men. Chapter 6 challenges the dominant historical narrative of the Mississippi freedom struggle, documenting Black women's resistance to racial and sexual abuse. And Chapter 7 documents how white supremacists in Selma and across the South used the rhetoric of rape and miscegenation to resuscitate and revive massive resistance, underscoring the importance of sex and sexual violence to maintain white supremacy. So, Michelle or Avril, did anyone have anything to say about the main key points that I've just discussed in the prologue? If not, I can go into chapter 1.
I guess I would just add that one of the things that struck me um, in the telling of the story about Reese Taylor, as she presents it in the prologue, was just that when Reese was kidnapped or taken by the 6 white men, um, she was walking down a dark country road late at night with her 61-year-old friend and that friend's 18-year-old son. And so a lot of what stayed with me was what that must have also felt like for them.
Right. And the fact that we are taught, at least as women, part of rape culture is, don't walk alone. And she wasn't alone, and she was still kidnapped. So that was a big,
Right.
that was, yeah, that was hard to read as well. She was with somebody. And with a man at that, legally, he's considered, the 18-year-old was considered a man. So she was still not protected. So I thought that was something.
Yeah. Okay.
So chapter 1, key points, titled "If They Told Me, They Kill Me If I Told." First point, we learn of Rosa Parks' family, her father, James McCauley, mother, Leona Edwards, and her grandparents. Her grandfather played a very instrumental role in her being such an activist. We learned that shortly after Reese Taylor was kidnapped, her family and community worked to save and find her. Reese Taylor's attackers were sought after and questioned, but were eventually released, free to roam the city, leaving Reese afraid for her safety. We learned that the Scottsboro case of Alabama was able to fuel the fire of Reese Taylor's case, as Alabama now had a bad reputation and were being watched nationally. We learned that soldiers abroad were angry at the mistreatment of Black Americans, and they threatened indifference while fighting if the freedom and protection they were fighting for globally was not returned in their home country. We learned that Rosa Parks worked with the NAACP and a network of other newspapers, organizations, and activists across the country to get Reese Taylor's attackers indicted. Reese Taylor was able to have her attackers go to court twice, the second time with more evidence than the first. With a jury of all white men and a white judge, the men were never indicted. Reese Taylor and her family were moved to Montgomery and her husband given work because they were no longer safe in Abbeville. Throughout the chapter, we learned of other women who suffered interracial rape, usually by gangs of white men, who were raped after believing their assailants would give them work or offer them rides home. By the end of the chapter, the NAACP and other organizations must move on from Reese Taylor's rape and focus on others. But we are reminded that Reese Taylor's bravery to speak up sparked a movement that would highlight the sexual violence bestowed on Black women during the Depression, Civil Rights Movement, and Jim Crow. So anything from those main points from chapter 1?
Yeah, the one of the really striking things for me, I thought it was a bit laborious, the whole family history of Rosa Parks, family tree and everything, but what was really great about it was that it showed, just as Avril was just saying, it was in her family and it was in my family, where the sort of basis of our political education was found. And in the case of Rosa Parks, certainly her grandfather on her mother's side, but there were others who were very light skinned and had a whole history of interracial rape and consensual sex in their history going back to slavery. And so her grandfather on her mother's side had a real hatred for white people, even though he often passed as one. But he's the one that really instilled in Rosa the sense that you don't take bad treatment from anybody.
Right.
And so, yeah, I thought that was a real key point of the chapter.
I was just very happy to learn so much about Rosa. It was a lot, you know. She got into the family history to me sometimes mid sentence of talking about Rosa or about a certain family member. But again, like I said, I hadn't learned much about Rosa in school, or had ever thought to take initiative of my own because I thought that what I was learning was important. And so
Right.
it allowed me to see her as human, you know, as a woman. You know, she is married, she has a preference, you know. So it just made her a lot more relatable, um,
Yes.
you know, as a person by learning of her history and her grandparents, her you know her parents.
Yes. Yes.